So you're an astronaut today?
Yeah.
Where are you flying off to?
Jupiter.
Jupiter? What are you going to find there?
Actually it was to Mars.
So you're only going to Mars? You're not going as far as Jupiter?
Yeah.
Okay, what are you going to find on Mars?
Well, I'm gonna take a picture of a crater
Oh.
on there and see if I can meet some aliens.
So you're going to meet some aliens on Mars, but you want to take a picture of a crater. Okay. Well, I wish you well, but hey, fist bump, safe travels. Boom. All right, don't take the corona to Mars. Hey, what's up, everybody? Today we are doing whole wheat bread. Obviously, we're not doing it live, but hopefully the video gives you that live feeling. I will still be checking Facebook at the normal time. This will post, so I can answer your questions more or less in real time, but it won't be in real time. Magic at TV, totally fine, not a big deal. What are we making today? Whole wheat bread, right? Just because it's the Corona-mageddon, we're all kind of quarantined and we're social distancing and everything is shutting down and we're told to hunker down in place and do what we gotta do. Doesn't mean we have to eat super fatty processed things all the time. You might want to still keep your whole wheat intake up. So we're gonna make some really simple, lean whole wheat bread. Now when I talk about bread, I say lean and I say enriched. An enriched dough is one that has sugar, eggs, fats, stuff like that added to it, much like our dinner rolls. And they bake at a much lower temperature. They're much, much softer in general. A lean dough is a dough in the absence of those things. So things like baguette, typically sourdough, things that don't have added fats or sugars, and especially eggs, which have both. Those are lean dough. So we're gonna be making a lean whole wheat dough today. So you can kind of think of it very loosely as a whole wheat baguette style, okay? We're gonna make it using commercial yeast. It will be instant yeast again. Hopefully by now you've been following along with the series. I can kind of talk to you on a more professional level and I can say, hey, we're gonna do the direct dough mixing method for bread, which means everything goes in the bowl all at one time, right? We're not pre-mixing, we're not pre-fermenting, we're not doing anything like that. If this Corona-mageddon goes on forever, you guys might get really in detailed descriptions of how to make bread. But for now, we're gonna keep it kind of surface level because it's more likely to be what you're gonna do. I'm gonna use a machine because I'm lazy, but of course you can have your kids knead this by hand if you want to. It'll kill a whole lot of time. So in the bowl, a pound of flour, 340 grams of whole wheat flour, 6 grams of instant yeast, 560 grams of water. If you weigh that out as milliliters, that is also fine. And of course, 17 grams of salt. I would not go much higher or lower. That's a really good margin for salt on this. When we're talking about mixing our lean doughs in the initial stages, we don't want to start adding any kind of particulates to them. I wouldn't start adding any spices or anything because it'll change the way that it ferments. It'll change the way the yeast incorporates with the dough. So leave it alone. We can add stuff later. But the direct dough mixing method is, we pour all this water. Do you want to pour the water in? Astronaut Blaze? Just make sure to pour it in. Very, very gently. Whoa, okay. Make sure we get it all. Tip it all the way. I know it seems silly, but these couple drops add up to a lot at the end of the day, right? So, as you see me do, I don't want to create a giant mess, so I'm gonna do a gentle premix with my hook and hands. That way I don't coat my surface in flour, because we want to work really clean, right, bud? Yeah. Alright, so we're gonna scrape and scrape and scrape. We're gonna mix this for 6 to 7 minutes on low or medium speed. By now, I hope you guys have heard me say my mixer pretty much only works on medium speed. At some point, I'll replace it and get a bigger, more professional level mixer, but for now, it's fine, so we just keep it rolling. So, on the mixer, this again could be done by hand. You could do it in a bowl, you could do it on a counter, if that's what you wanted to do. Either way is fine. Just make sure to mix and mix and mix, right? It'll be really, really kind of a shaggy mess as you mix it initially, especially by hand. And you'll see me covering the top here with my hands. It's another little insurance policy of mine to try and keep my counters nice and clean when using a machine. But when you're mixing by hand, it'll stick to you a lot in the beginning because it hasn't formed enough gluten yet. And as you go, it'll start to stick to itself. It'll adhere to itself. So your hands should get cleaner and cleaner as you go, a good indicator that the gluten has fully developed. Now, another key indicator that we talked about earlier in the whole series is we used our instant yeast, which is in kind of the pill shape, So as I look at my dough, it'll be a little harder to tell with whole wheat dough because the whole wheat has much bigger chunks of wheat throughout. But you should still be able to tell that the yeast is fully incorporated. Now as we watch it, we can see some key things. It's cleaning the bowl for us. Right now it's a really kind of a stiff mass. It's kind of dull in appearance. It has a pocky texture across the surface. As it mixes for longer and longer, it'll get a little smoother. It'll get a little shinier. It'll get much more uniform in texture. Now, the big thing about mixing bread doughs, especially lean doughs, is you can very easily overmix them if you're not paying attention. If you don't have an amazing internal clock like I do, or you don't have an eye for seeing it because you've messed it up plenty of times before, set a timer. If you overmix your dough and you over glutenize it, that gluten strand that we talked about, the two slinkies kind of tied together, they will break and they will never come back together. This is essentially what happens when you make pasta, right? It gets really, really, really stiff, and then the gluten relaxes and you can roll it out and you can make all kinds of crazy shapes and stuff. While pasta is crazy delicious, we want this to be a loaf of bread, not a giant noodle. Could you imagine this being a giant noodle? That'd be weird, right?
Yeah.
What's your favorite noodle?
I don't know.
You like bow ties?
Yeah.
Elbows? Like macaroni and cheese elbows? Shells? Rotini? Gemelli? Fusilli? Rigatoni? Are you even listening? Gosh, what do you guys eat in space?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay. But we're mixing. As you can tell with the lean dough, there's not really a lot that goes on. With your machine, don't be afraid to time kind of help it out here. If your dough ever gets on top of the kind of disc that separates the hook from everything else, stop it, pull it off there. What you don't want it to do is to bind up. It won't get into the gears, but it can make quite a mess of all the moving parts up here. And then basically you have to let it dry and kind of scrape it off. And it looks as delicious as it sounds, dried up, unproofed bread. So we try to avoid that where we can, right? We're coming up on the 3 or 4 minute mark. My bread's looking really nice. You can tell it's cleaned the bowl everywhere it can reach. That's a really good indicator for us. This is a low hydration bread as far as we consider it. It's down in the 60 to 70% range. If you like this recipe, but you're like, you know what, I could use a little bit more airiness, I could use it to be a little softer, or you're always chasing that Instagram worthy, really holy dough, you have to start bumping up the hydration a little bit. The best way to do that is achieve the full gluten here. In the last minute or two of mixing, add about another 30 to 40 grams of water, and then mix that in. When that comes together, you're good to go. Continue as normal. I think my bread is good. You can tell, hopefully already, like it doesn't stick to me at all. That's a really good indication that it has the gluten development that I'm looking for. We can go ahead and pull it off of our hook. It should not leave much of a mess behind at all. Get it all off of there, because dishes are a pain. And if you're gonna make this again and again and again, the less you have to wash your dishes, the better, right? So we will take our dough, we will put it in a bowl, gently sprayed or oiled in some way.
I think someone's asking for us to get the joke.
To get the joke. Okay, do you have a joke for us?
Yep.
What's your joke?
What did one slice of bread say to other before the race?
So the 2 slices of bread were racing each other. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so what did the 1 slice of bread say to the other slice of bread before it was gonna race the original slice of bread?
Your toast.
Your toast? Oh man, because it's so fast, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good joke. Good job, Astronaut Blaze. Fist bump. Boo! Alright, so here's our bread. Another little kind of pro tip, advanced technique here is gently wet your hands and round this into as even a ball as you can. It's what we call a homogeneous membrane, and as fun as that is to say, it's actually really important that we have a really even surface with a good kind of texture and structure. That way it'll keep all the gases inside. Now, just like we did with our other bread, we're gonna wrap this real tight.
Can I touch it?
You can touch it.
One.
What do you think? How's it feel?
Squishy.
Squishy, yeah, it's squishy.
It's so squishy that I can't stop touching it.
Okay, but we need to stop touching it because we have to proof it, okay? So, as we talked about earlier with bread, wrap it with plastic wrap. I like to wrap it super, super tight. It's fitting. We have Astronaut Blaze here today because in my career, I've always said I wrap it as tight as if it's going into space, right? Really tight across the surface. That way I can see the gases form and I can see it start to bubble as my dough proofs out. That way I know that it is fully proofed. So we're gonna put this in a warm, draft-free area.
In dough baker,
Yeah.
you have to wrap it really tight. That way, like the plastic wrap just like doesn't float into space.
That's right. I gotta make sure my...
Leaves it behind.
Yes, I need to make sure my plastic wrap doesn't float away into the empty void of space. You're very right. So we're gonna proof this until it is doubled in size. It's really nice out now that it finally stopped raining, so I'm guessing it'll be 45 minutes to an hour. Because we're doing the magic of TV today, we're gonna cut it and we'll come back when it's ready. We'll do the next stage, cut it, come back. But 45 minutes to an hour. Thanks, guys.
Woo! Having it pop up like a bubble.
Okay.
Wait, is it gonna pop?
Okay, be careful. But it's a very good question, even though you're very animated this time of day. How do we have such a bubble? Well, when the yeast that we added fully starts eating all of the flours and the sugars and the waters that we gave it, it's a lot of food, right? And then we made it exercise a lot, right? Because we beat it around, we activated all that gluten, we made it do its thing. So the yeast starts expelling carbon dioxide, right? You can think of it like the yeast eats all this stuff and then it expels the carbon dioxide, kind of like it farts it out. Isn't that funny?
Mama just said we use the word 2D2.
Oh, we don't use the word fart? Okay. Well, so we won't talk about that. You can say it burps it out, you can say it expels it any other way you want. It doesn't matter. The yeast eats everything we give it. It expels CO2, that's what causes it to rise. This dome traps that CO2 excess in there. And so what we'll do is remove this. Astronaut Blaze, how does it smell?
Good.
But does it smell good? Does it smell like bread? Ooh, it smells like wheat bread for sure, right? Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna take a little bench flour right over the surface, right? We're gently gonna punch it down. Now, do you wanna have some fun, Astronaut Blaze?
Yep.
Okay.
Punch balls.
Here, hold out your hands, roll up your, are they sleeves today or is it another metal coat?
I don't know.
Okay, well roll up your sleeves. I'll help you. Hold out your hands. Hold them out like a cup. Okay, we're gonna put some flour in there, brush them together. Not? Yeah, okay, that'll work. And then what I want you to do is you can put your hand in the dough and just slap it down. Go for it. Whoa, look at it. Do it again. See how it's dropping down? We're knocking the excess air out of it to where we can punch it all the way down.
And then it goes bye-bye.
It does not go bye-bye, but we are gonna be able to work with it much more easily at this point. Now, this is a pretty substantial piece of dough. If you want like sandwich bread for the week, I would say roll this out, and if it's 1.5 pounds, I'll weigh it in a second, that way we know what we're looking at. But we can
Joe
put...
Baker,
Yes, sir.
can I go get my toy piece of wheat bread just in case someone doesn't know what wheat bread looks like?
You know what, buddy? I think they'll find out through the course of this series. But we can compare and contrast your toy of wheat bread to my actual wheat bread when we bake it. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Does that sound fair? Fair, okay. So I am going to grab my scale. And what we're looking at here, we want to see how much dough we have so we can tell the people at home what to do with it. So this recipe is 3 pounds, my goodness. So that would be 2 of the loaf pans that we made with our other bread, right? Cut it in half, shape it just like that. So maybe we'll do 1 in a loaf pan and we'll do 1 loose, right? And to do it loose, what we do is we're gonna make what's called a boule. Boule, of course, is French for ball. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a cloth that we have. This is a regular kitchen towel. We're gonna dust it with rice flour. If you don't have rice flour, but you have any other gluten-free flour alternative, they work extremely well. You can see I'm just kind of patting it into the fibers. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our ball of dough here.
Can I put one on?
Well, sure. So what we're gonna do, you remember how I showed you the karate chop shaping?
Yeah.
Okay, can you karate chop shape this for me? Kind of. Keep going, buddy. I mean, the faces help, but I don't know how much they help, you know? Yeah. So you're getting there. Can I give it a go?
Nope.
Nope? Okay.
You can do it on the back.
Okay, so this one will go into our loaf pan. And what I'll do is I'll gently pat it into a little bit of a rectangle.
Okay, I think I did it.
Okay, we'll come back to that one. We'll fold the ends in just a little bit, make it more squared off. We will pull it just a little bit to give it some nice surface tension, and then we will gently roll it up and over itself until we get a nice rounded shape. I'm always using my bowl scraper. If you don't have a bowl scraper, of course, you can just flour your hands and you can just kind of tuck it in there like that, right? But we want to make sure that it's got a nice shape. That way it will spread and rise evenly. Good surface tension again, keeping that gas inside of our dough. And we'll drop that in a loaf pan. You guys saw it recently. But our boule here, Astronaut Blaze did a great job, but we're close.
You actually scraped in my hand a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry, I scraped your hand. But we'll take and we'll do that karate chop shaping again.
Yay.
Right? We'll just kind of cup it under
Can I
while we
put it on
rotate it.
this
Well, buddy, I've already shaped this one. Okay, so just watch, right? So we're making it nice and tight. We want to get it as round as we can.
Like this.
You can definitely overwork it. If you see that the surface starts to tear anywhere, just stop. You're making it too tight and it won't be able to open back up, okay? So here we have this. If you don't have rice flour or any of the gluten-free substitutes, you can use a decent amount of regular flour. Just know that it may stick. It's really a problem with higher hydration doughs. This one shouldn't stick at all, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna scrape that. We're gonna put it onto our towel that's been dusted with flour.
Hey, Dad, I got another joke for you.
Okay, what's your other joke for me?
What did a plant say to the bread? I mean, how does a plant make a sandwich? I mean, how does a plant make bread?
How does a plant make bread? I honestly don't know. How does a plant make bread?
With weed bread.
With weed? Oh, so it makes weed bread.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of like wheat bread, except it's weed.
Yeah, you're too young to know what all of that really means, but that's fine. Anyway, so we have it on our towel. We'll pull it up on the sides like so. And I happen to have one of these convenient little bread baskets.
Yay.
If you just have the mixing bowl that it came out of, that's also a completely fine option. All we need to do is drop it in there. And what it will do is it'll help it rise. And the bowl is important, much like the loaf pan is important, because again, as the bread wants to rise up, it will also try and rise out. So as this continues to get bigger, it'll get fatter as well. The bowl will help give it some really nice structure. That way when I bake it, it's more round and it'll be taller than if I were to try and proof it without the bowl, okay? Now both of these still need to be covered. We're still worried about airflow. We want to cover them fairly loosely like we did with our pizza dough. So I would recommend a trash bag, a shopping bag, since these are much smaller now, or of course you can just put them in a draft-free area. At this point, your oven doesn't need to be preheated, so they can sit in your oven until they are fully proofed. Again, I'm thinking it'll be about 45 minutes to an hour. Of course, we will adjust as we go. Make sure to check it often. If you overproof it, that is a problem. If you bake it underproofed, it's still delicious bread, so we'll figure it out from there. What else do you have to say, Astronaut Blaze? Anything?
No.
Okay, well then we'll check back in with you guys when we go into final proofing and baking. Thank you. Alright guys, so our breads are fully proofed. You can tell the wrap is on this one. I wanted to show you the best way to take it off. Right, peel it straight back, nice and slow. You might have to kind of wiggle it from side to side. You might have to pull the surface down just a little bit. Again, with the low hydration doughs, they're pretty forgiving. You can kind of peel the surface down and it won't be the end of the world. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to poke it like Astronaut Blaze did with the earlier ones, right? When we were still bulk fermenting and stuff. If we poke it, we might accidentally deflate it. So we've pulled that off. It looks nice. Now what I'm going to do is give it a little dusting of flour. Just a little, and a little on this one. But this is actually going to be the bottom, okay? So here's our loaf bread. We've seen this before. This is pretty easy, but we've seen it with what's an enriched dough. Now with an enriched dough, we leave the surface alone, and I actually brush it with oil because I wanted to get the most rise possible. With a lean dough, what we want to do is we want to come through and we want to score it because the crust will set before the inside is done expanding. So it's gonna crack somewhere. What we're gonna do is we're gonna score it so that it cracks where we want it to. It can also be fairly decorative. For a wheat bread, I'm gonna make it nice and easy. We can do a couple diagonal slashes. We can do one down the center. If you're really, really into it, you can do all kinds of hashtags and whatever and designs. Yeah.
Like smiley faces.
Like smiley faces, but you have to be very, very good, which honestly I'm not. And a lot of times we need to be able to score very quickly because these were not cold fermented. Because they were warm fermented, we kind of need to get them in right away, right? So I'm just going to do one score right down the middle. I'm using a serrated knife. I'm scoring the bread, that way it has room to open. If you need to go back and do it more than once, that's okay. What I'm not trying to do is stab the dough and saw it. I'm just grazing the dough. We want it to score at least 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep, and we want to make it as uniform across the surface as possible. Straight into a preheated 400 or 425 degree oven, and we will go from there. Now, let's talk about a slightly advanced technique for our boule. If you have a Dutch oven or an apparatus like you're about to see me pull out, if you have what's called a cloche, or some things that could be a cloche, you can get much, much better results than with the loaf pan, as in you'll get a crispier bread. Now what this does is we have to create our own chamber inside of our baking oven that will trap all the steam that the bread releases. It'll keep the surface very pliable. It'll get the most expansion. It'll build up on there. Then when we remove the cloche to finish baking, it'll get really crispy and crusty. Now, this is super, super important. Do not touch the pan I'm about to pull out of the oven, okay? It is 425 degrees Fahrenheit. It is very, very hot. Yes, sir?
Wait, does Fahrenheit mean cold or hot?
Fahrenheit is just how we measure temperature. So your body is 98 degrees Fahrenheit. This is 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot, right? Okay, so don't touch it.
Okay. I'll try to stay away from it so it doesn't burn my hair.
That's good. So what I have here is the base, right? These are just cast iron saute pans or skillets. What I will do is I will gently turn out my dough. With the rice flour, it should just peel off nice and easy.
Wait.
I still need to score this. Yes, Astronaut Blaze?
How many degrees Fahrenheit is your body?
My body is also 98-ish degrees Fahrenheit. For this, we're going to do a simple square score. We're just going to score a giant square. We'll do one in the middle, get like a little wheat leaf, and then we have to put the cloche on it, right? We have to cover the top. Now, this is the difficult part, but if you work smart and you don't burn yourself, everything will be just fine. This whole thing goes back in the oven. Push it as far back as you can go. The loaf pan, since it is uncovered, should take about 15 to 20 minutes. The cloche, the enclosed baking unit, will take about 25 minutes. Then we will uncover it and bake it for another 5 to 8 minutes, depending on how dark we want our bread. So we'll check back in with you when we uncover the cloche and we'll show you the loaf bread that's done. All right, fist bump. Boom. All right, guys, so we've been in the oven for 17 minutes. I decided I like the color on this. You see, we don't get a ton of like exponential rise out of the lean doughs like we do out of our rich doughs. All that fat melting and stuff doesn't create as much steam. Plus, when it's stuck in here, it's one thing. Now, this is still raging hot, so be careful. Let it cool in the pan for 5 or so minutes. Then it needs to come out of the pan, otherwise it'll get sweaty. And the heat can make the dough cave in on the sides. It starts pushing both ways on the bread and it actually smashes it. So only about 5 minutes in the pan, get it out to cool completely on a wire rack. The cloche though, since I'm assuming this is what most of you haven't seen, remove it very carefully straight up, watch the steam, and you see we have a good amount of rise, but it's all very soft because it's been steamed nonstop for the surface. So now this goes back into the oven, still at the same temperature, until we achieve the color we want. If we were only looking to par bake our loaf, which is to bake it until it's set, but send it to somebody or give it to somebody or sell it to somebody so they could final bake it, we would remove it, let it cool all the way. It's done all it's gonna do except take color at this point. So if you know you're gonna make a huge amount of bread and then freeze it, I recommend this technique. Pull it out here, freeze it. When you bake it the second time, bake it to the proper color, from frozen, and you will be good to go. Otherwise, we're gonna bake this all the way, and we're gonna use it, eat it, and enjoy it.